Let's hear it again from my opening act, Tim Ellis.
On to the main show, I guess, right? That's the two of us. That's enough time.
Consulting the CMO in my first 4 hours in LA for Super Bowl week was on my bingo.
Yeah. Congrats. You're one letter closer to winning. So Tim talked about the success that you guys have had this year in terms of ratings. You're setting all-time highs, or the championship games just set, I think, 8-year highs in terms of ratings. The top 20 shows, I think 16 or 18 of those are NFL games. What do you think is driving the rating success that you've seen? And from your point of view, how are you using media, either with your partners, the broadcast partners, or the cable nets, or even Amazon to drive tune-in for those shows? Games.
Sure. Well, clearly, it's the amazing media plans that we put in the market that drives tune-in, that's driving all the rating. But look, I mean, it's been an incredible season. I think a room full of people here suggests that we're all anxious to get back to some sense of normalcy. I think people are looking to be entertained and talked about it. That's driving a lot of it. The product on the field has been tremendous. Those 4 championship games, the 4 playoff games were tremendous. 2 championship games were tremendous. The football is great and people are tuning in. I think, my team's job from a media perspective is just to ensure that all of that great content that Tim talks about to engage fans gets seen. Now, it's easy to say, well, okay, you just run some commercials on NFL games, which is the biggest thing on television, and call it a day. But the reality is, when we talk about how do we get new fans in, how do we continue to grow, our goal is not to have a smaller fan base, it's to have a larger fan base. The ratings need to get bigger every year, so we need to invite more people in. Shane said it, showing a spot in an NFL game on the Super Bowl has a role in deepening engagement with the fans who are watching. But if I want to attract a new, younger fan, chances are they're not watching the game. So we have to go out and do it. So to answer your question about how we're using media, it's to go out and address the growth audiences that we need to go after, largely a younger, more diverse audience, to protect the health of the future of our fan base.
Right. And how do you partner up with your broadcast partners in terms of, the driving tune in for the games themselves? They have their own budgets. Do you complement that? How does the partnership work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, they have a vested interest in driving tune in to their own networks, and they do that. And we work in concert with them to ensure that whatever we're doing at a league level is complementary and works in concert with them. And not cannibalizing each other. And largely we do that. We want to make sure we're driving tune into all of our network partners, our broadcast partners. And they're responsible for each of their individual games. I think what the leadership of my boss, Andy Kaufman, one of the things we're pushing forward is how do we get smarter, more advanced, and leverage the shared learning, the shared data that can exist with our individual partners to get even smarter about how we do exactly what we talked about, which is putting the brand message in front of those fans.
And at a tactical level,
so I pissed off the CMO, but I kissed my boss's ass. I just want.
In terms of the specific tactics that your team uses versus the networks, where, I guess, do you differentiate from what they're looking to do in terms of either building ratings or just in terms of reaching some of the target audiences that Tim mentioned?
There's a couple things. I think we will work, under Tim's creative leadership, work with the partners just in the tone for what are we trying to say, what's the key message we want to deliver across the year, how are we going to communicate with our fans, and ensure that our partners are working under sort of that guideline. But they are, again, responsible for driving specific date and time tune-in for their network. We, as the league, want to ensure that our fans are aware of all of the ways in which they can consume those games. So we work in complete concert with each other.
And you talked about some of the audiences, and Tim talked about some of the audiences that you're looking to grow. When we talked earlier, there's clearly the avid NFL fan, that core audience that tunes in each and every game. Can you talk about sort of how you think about the different audiences that you're engaging with and how you specifically message to them? Is it different based on the specific target audiences?
Sure. I think it's probably not too dissimilar than many of the marketers in this room of there's protect the core, grow the core, and attract new. The same for us with our core avid fans. We want to deepen engagement, deepen avidity with those audiences. So our NFL media properties do a great job of home for football 24/7, whether that's our digital products or our cable network. And then certainly the games themselves, we have an opportunity to message all the things Tim showed and making people feel good about their fandom. And then going out and acquire new fans, again, predominantly younger. What does the future of our fan base look like in 10 years? We're thinking about that in marketing now, and how do we engage with them? How do we get more young people participating in the game, participating in flag or tackle, and putting those messages in front of those audiences? If we're going to attract in more fans and represent the country, football is for everyone. We need to ensure that we're talking to a diverse audience and going to the places where they are and messaging it. One of the things that struck me when I joined the NFL was just how much incredible content comes out of the building every single day. Ian's team is an absolute machine. He'll talk about it. So we want to make sure that we are helping to put that content in the right places for the audience.
And when you think about reaching the youth audience or Latinx, or I think Tim mentioned women as well, are you partnering up with the local teams and doing local initiatives, or is your mandate sort of more broad and working at on a national level?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, we try to benefit all 32 clubs, so work at a national level. But certainly, if there are times and places where we can support what the clubs are doing, we do that. If there are certain markets that make sense for a certain audience, we'll certainly lean in there as well. But to the degree to which we can make sure we're benefiting all 32, is good for us.
And in terms of the NFL Network, your team is responsible for, I'm assuming, driving tune-in. And how do you think about the NFL Network, how you leverage that to reach the avid fan, these growth audiences, and what specifically you're doing to drive tune-in around the games?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost is exactly the first thing you said. It's a great place to deepen avidity. So it's a great home for avid fans and the source of football 24/7. So we start there, try to draw in, but then we have a number of big tentpole events. We have a number of exclusive games every year that air only on the NFL Network, and we leverage those to the best of our ability to help drive the network, the brand of the network, and then bring them in and promote some of the great program we have, like Good Morning Football.
And you talked about using data, obviously, to grow your audiences. How do you think about data in general? Are you relying more on first-party data, working with partners on that? Tell us a little bit about the insights that you're pulling, from all the different media partners you may work with. I'd love to hear more thoughts on how you approach.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the idea of mass intimacy, right? Because we're trying to get bigger, we're not trying to get smaller. So scale for us is good and important. It's why people come to the NFL, because of the sheer scale and the size of our fan base. So we don't want to ever abandon that, and want to leverage that as much as possible. So in terms of first-party data, we use it to segment and understand how people become fans, why they come to the NFL, and what are they most interested in. Make sure we serve them that content. And then I'm using that to understand how else can we attract new fans. We do that. And then if we're trying to find fans that aren't in our database because they're not fans yet, we have to rely on some third-party data and some other avenues to go out and attract those fans to turn them into fans.
Tim mentioned Super Bowl Sunday, all sorts of Super Bowl activities this week. You're able to leverage your on-air promos, reaching a massive audience. How do you think about your on-air promos, and then how are you leveraging that this week and for the Super Bowl?
Yeah, well, we will act and are acting like many Super Bowl advertisers this week. We have what we believe is a innovative massive spot. Tim talked about it, and we're out driving excitement and interest in that spot now with some teasers. And then once that spot airs, my team will kick into motion and ensure that people can see it again and again and again, and help tell the story, and some additional content will come out after that. So we act like many Super Bowl advertisers do, and think about it that way, because it is an amazing platform to tell your brand story. And as Shane said, it's an opportunity for us to tell the NFL a brand story in a different, more fun way.
Now, this is your, I think, third season here at the NFL. How do you think about the off season and what is top of mind once the Super Bowl does end? How are you thinking about summer and fall and re-engaging those audiences?
It's funny. I have neighbors say to me all the time, "Oh, you must be excited. The season's ending. You have time off now, right? You get to relax." And the reality is, I have a meeting in a couple of days to talk about next Super Bowl. We pivot immediately to talk about the combine and draft and pro days and go right into next season. So we're almost, I think we're pretty much busier in the off season than we are, because the reality is, and I think Tim said it, this isn't just start of the season, end of the season, and we're done. It's a 365 endeavor. Fandom doesn't end, and people are hungry for more and more and more. And we have developed a great way to engage fans all year. So we'll be right on to borrow, paraphrase Bill Belichick, we're on to the draft.
And in terms of how you work with your different media agencies and developing an in-house team, can you talk about sort of how you approach those relationships and partnerships?
Sure. Yeah, we work with two great agencies. OMD is a strategic partner of ours, and then Tenuity is a performance media agency that does a lot of our biddable buying. But then we're also, like many brands, have stood up an in-house team. And we've done that to allow us to be just fast to market. I mentioned the sheer volume of content we have, and we want to make sure we're constantly putting them in front of the right people and putting fuel on that with paid media. It's a lot easier for us to do that in-house. And I think about whether it's the team we have in-house or whether it's one of the two agencies we work with, it's all an extension of our team. Some of them just have a different email address. And we just try to determine what are we trying to put out, how are we trying to deliver this message, and what's going to be the best way to utilize it. And we have two great partners and a great in-house team to be able to do that.
One of the things we see at LG Eds is outside of sporting events, a huge shift from linear to CTV. So as you think about ways to reach your audiences, how are you leveraging the CTV space to reach maybe some harder to reach audiences like, you know, the youth audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's what we look at and think about all the time. Again, just back to how do we reach the right audience where they are, and more as we think about young audiences, they're not necessarily sitting down in front of a large screen television for 3 hours watching a game. So we need to find other ways to engage them and talk about and encourage them to watch, whether it's our media properties, watch the NFL Network, or watch some of our games. So it's becoming an increasingly important part of our media mix for sure.
And from a media planning standpoint, how do you view programmatic versus managed service? Is it just a matter of finding, you know, the most efficient play, or just identifying those specific audiences and backing into the right media tactics to hit those?
It starts with how do I find the right audience, and then what's the right way to deliver. So programmatic it's a way to buy media, right? And I think it doesn't necessarily need to be talked about in terms of a channel, because it's a form of buying display, now video media. So to me, it's about how are we going to find that audience, and then of course do it the most efficient way possible. So we're looking at that, but we're constantly testing our way and learning and understanding, you know, what does performance look like for us. And for us, we're driving tune in, oftentimes in a way that's not necessarily attributable. So what does performance look like? So we're constantly testing ways to determine what that looks like. We have an app, we have digital subscription services, we're an acquisition business on that side. We have a pretty good sense of what performance looks like there. And we have to operate sort of in that dual mindset of we're building a brand, a true brand marketer, while also driving performance. We're driving, you know, we're selling hats, we're selling jerseys. So we think about, again, how do we find the right audience for that?
And from a measurement standpoint, you had mentioned we can clearly capture measurement in terms of ratings. Here at LG Ads, we have the ability to track who's exposed to ads and who tuned into a linear show or a game, or we can also look at who's clicking into what apps. When you think about sort of the TV OEM measurement space, is that an area you're leaning into, or are you relying more on the partners for that? How do you think about measurement in general?
I think if we lean any further into that, I'm going to fall off the chair. Yes, and if anyone has the silver bullet solution, let's talk. I mean, it's critically important. Again, we're trying to drive tune-in. How are we driving? How do we know, right? And And we are so blessed that we have our partners who are talking about football and amazing sponsors who are constantly talking about football. It's not always easy to understand through all that noise, because what we are doing specifically is driving to. And again, at the end of the day, ratings go up, we're all happy. But as we want to continue to get smarter and smarter and smarter, understanding how our behaviors are driving tune is critically important for us.
And speaking of ratings, so next year Amazon's going to be running Thursday Night Football. How is that partnership? They're not reporting on ratings. Does that make your job a little bit harder, or do they share tune-in analysis with you? How do you think about a partnership with Amazon versus the networks?
We're extremely thrilled for the Amazon partnership because of what it can represent for us in terms of the conversation we had before about data and shared audiences and shared insights into audiences, right? They're pretty good at that. So we've already kicked off conversations and are looking forward to sort of driving that. I think we can, in terms of identifying what performance looks like. Andy and I are chomping at the bit to sort of dig into that, because I think we're going to get a lot smarter and have some fun doing it.
And do they operate differently than your linear partners? Clearly, they sit on a treasure trove of data. Do you notice certain similarities or differences as you think about the partnership with them versus, some of your broadcast partners?
Well, it's early days, so we'll see. But they are like all of our partners, immensely interested in driving the biggest audience possible. It's a unique challenge that we'll see what happens with moving to Amazon this coming season, but we'll see. They've shown nothing but interest and excitement and are ready to get going as the exclusive partner, and I think it's going to be some fun.
You've worked on some iconic brands over the years, specifically on the agency side, Audi, Volkswagen, Dunkin' Donuts. Curious to get your thoughts on what made you decide to move from the agency side to the client side, and what's it like working on such a global iconic brand like NFL?
I got tired of clients telling me what to do. So I just have to tell me what to do. Playing fullback for the New York Giants was a dream. It didn't happen, so I had to find a different way to get to the NFL. My 40 time wasn't quite what it needed to be. But I jumped at the chance to work in this role at a time when talk was just starting to happen that the league was in early stages of negotiations of the re-upping the rights deals. And as a career-long media guy, that's literally the future of television. So aside from working in football and getting to work with Kim and doing that, just was immensely interesting to have a little bit of an inside look at how that happened and what was going to happen from that result in something like the Amazon deal. I found that to be incredibly exciting and interesting, and one of the big reasons why I wanted to make the jump.
And what are some of the, similarities or differences working at the NFL on such a global iconic brand versus some of the other brands that you worked with in the past?
The thing that has hit me time and again, and Tim talked about it, is just the platform and the sheer scale. And I knew we had a meeting. I know what the audience looks like, but I don't think I fully appreciated what that meant culturally, and how literally everything we do has an impact on society. People react to it, and that has meaning. And I had, as a football fan, had a view of the league office or the NFL a certain way, and then working with the people now, and just how serious everyone takes that and how meaningful that is to people, and are protective of that and making sure we do, as Tim said, do the right thing. Not to say those other brands don't do the right thing, but it's a completely different level, completely different scale.
And how are you using media to help promote or evangelize some of the things that Tim talked about, just with all the different organizations, nonprofits, all the cause-related activity that the NFL does? How does media play a role?
It's making sure all of that incredible content gets seen, and not only gets seen. Again, it's easy to say, "Oh, we're just going to traffic it to NBC. It's going to run on the Super Bowl, and we're good." But it gets seen by the right audiences and through the right channels, and not just relying on our own platforms. One of the when I remember interviewing with Tim, and he talked about just striving so much to get out of the mindset of just relying solely on our NFL properties. Right? I spent the better part of my media career trying to find the beg, borrow, and steal to get into the NFL, and I've heard like, I'm trying to get off the NFL and do other things. It's just an interesting challenge, but it's to answer your question, it's putting the content and using media to put that content in front of all of the right people.
And when you think about, I guess, the media mix that you use, is it obviously you have a ton of exposure through those games, but where else are you finding success in terms of some of the media tactics that you're using or the media mix? Is it primarily relying on the house ads in a game, or?
No, we will do a lot with our social platforms, and again, Ian's team is churning out tremendous content on a daily basis. So we have a lot of fun toys to play with all that great content, putting that in front. So we'll amplify that to our social partners. Increasingly looking for publisher partners to work with that aren't necessarily endemic to football, but Tim talked about sort of the areas which we focus on to be more youthful, whether it's music, fashion, or gaming. And those are interesting places for us to tell those stories, and we can do some interesting media partnerships and starting to do that. And then, as you mentioned before, from a data perspective, whether it's programmatic or connected TV or whatever it is, find the right places to be as surgical as possible to deliver those messages.
So having had the kind of success that you've had this past season, and certainly I'm sure through the Super Bowl, what are, I guess, some new opportunities you're thinking about come fall for next season?
Bigger, more. I think we're.
Well, I guess were there some key learnings?
Sure.
You found?
Sure.
But bigger is always better.
Yes, the key learnings. It's never enough. It's enough. I think it's to get this, continue to get smarter, leverage some of the new partnerships or the new ways in which the partnerships exist, to be as innovative as possible. I think we have an opportunity on the media side to match the creativity that comes from our partners at 72. I think we've done a good job at that. We can do an even better job. So I think that's sort of a focus for us, to allow the innovative storytelling that exists to come to life in media channels as well, as one. And then I think we touched on getting smarter and smarter about what our activity is doing to deliver the performance we're looking for, i.e., are we getting more eyeballs on our games?
Got it. Okay, I think we just have a couple minutes left. I guess maybe we'll open it up to the audience and see if anyone has hand raises in that section.
That's why I wore gym shoes today. Who's first?
Hi, I work for a European media company, so football has a different connotation. But Dave, I wanted to ask you, as you grow the fan base and you're learning about your consumers via data, have you learned anything in the UK about growing the fan base there? And what about the rumored expansion into Germany?
I will defer that second question to other colleagues of mine. My team's focus is primarily US based right now. We have a team working on our international work. We certainly partner with them. Again, I think we're growing. We see the popularity when we play our games there. The popularity there is immense. But we'll pick your brain and steal some learnings from you about how to get smarter there.
And we have time for one more. Hi, Dave. Scott Thornblazer with Taboola. How are you doing? Thanks for all your comments. In the past, I've worked with brands that have local wholesalership or local dealer associations, things like that. I'm curious how involved the local owners or the teams are with your advertising. Do they have a say in what you do in their local markets? Is there a co-op budget? Just curious how that works.
Yeah, it's a great question. I have mentioned Dunkin' Donuts and working on Motive, so I have similar experience in that. There are some similarities. I think from where I sit on the media side, again, our focus is across all 32, but spending more and more time ensuring that what we're doing works in support of the clubs as well. The clubs tend to, as you'd imagine, focus on their local markets. So we're there as a center of excellence to try to share best practices. But if they're going to market in paid social, we'll oftentimes get on the phone with the clubs and share our thoughts on what audiences are working. Our teams are sharing audiences with them to activate and giving them guidance in that. So there's continued partnership with the clubs, and it's getting closer and closer. Not unlike many franchisee models as well, where they have independence to work on their own, but then still relying on corporates. It's a pretty similar model.
Everyone, let's give some love to Dave and Adam.